And then Yavan is the shor. Kisvu lachem al keren hashor ein lachem chelek b'klal Yisrael. And now we have two more jobs left. We have the shoichet, and we have the malach hamaves. And we have two qualified candidates for both jobs. We have Edom and Yishmael. Who's going to be the shoichet? And who's going to be the malach hamaves? It's very hard. And you know, you have one job, and you have two candidates, and they're both very well equipped, and they're both very qualified, either to be a murderer or the angel of death. I would have said, maybe different than Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. My grandfather, Zechatzak Levracha, passed away on the first day of Pesach last year at 106 years old. He was a Talmud Muvuk of Rav Menachem Zemba, a Ben Bayis by Rav Menachem Zemba. He saw his grandfather was best friends of the Malbim in 1860. So I could look at my Zayda. I see a number of people here who knew my Zayda. I could look at my Zayda and I saw someone who knew the Malbim. I could look at my Zayda and he took me back 160 years. My grandfather was in all the dark places, in Auschwitz, in Dachau. He saw Dr. Mengele. Who's Dr. Mengele? What's his name? He's the angel of death. He's the malach hamaves. So I would have said, Edom. Edom's the malach hamaves. Yishmael's the shoichet. And I would say, Rav would say that, because Rav says the last nation standing is going to be Edom. But Reb Chaim says not so fast. Reb Chaim says the angel of death is Edom. And the last nation standing is the malach hamaves, is Yishmael. Says Reb Chaim, how do I know Yishmael will defeat Roimi? Says Reb Chaim, it's the opening Balaturim, the end of Parshas Chayisara, beginning of Toldos. Chayisara ends with the downfall of Yishmael. Parshas Toldos, Eila Toldos Yitzchak. Yitzchak is always a remez to the Geula. The Balaturim says, when Yishmael falls in the end of days, Oz Yavoy Ben David. So the Balaturim says explicitly, the last nation to stand will be Yishmael. So one thing we know for sure, there'll be two world superpowers in the end of days. Paras and Roimi. Who stands last is a machloket Rav. Rav says United States of America. And Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi say Yishmael. What does the Balaturim say? Yishmael. Ayin b'Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, Yishmael. Who's the psak acharono on such a thing? I guess Reb Chaim Kanievsky. What does Reb Chaim say? Yishmael. Does that make us feel good? Not at all. Here's another twist in that. The Gemara says the last nation standing will be Paras and Roimi. Who's Paras compared to? What animal? A bear. What nation in the world today is compared to a bear? There you go. Anybody know what the Vilna Gaon says about Russia? Which nation is Russia? The Gra writes explicitly. Paras. The Gra identifies Paras as Russia. So that means in the end of days, that's Maral, this is the Gra. The Gra says the last nation standing is USSR. So what do you do with all this? We go to the Rambam. And the Rambam says nobody should waste any time thinking about these things. Because nobody really knows what's going to happen in the end of days, because we have no clear tradition regarding the exact happenings, the Achros Hayamim, and contemplating these things, says the Rambam, does not bring to Yer Shamayim, does not bring to Shmiras HaMitzvahs, but Torah hi v'lomod anu tzarech. We have definitive viewpoints in the Gemara. The Gemara tells us Roimi and Paras. We have definitive identifications from the Vilna Gaon. We have definitive identifications from the Maharal. Says the Sefer Kav HaYashar that if you add up Edom and Yishmael, you get a numerical value of 502. If you add up the number of years that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov walked on this planet, Avraham lived 175 years. Yitzchak lived 180. Yaakov Avinu lived 147 years. Also gets you 502. Says the Kav HaYashar, until the end of days, there's a battle between the Bnei Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that try to disseminate the knowledge of the Shem Havaya, the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And there's a battle between Edom and Yishmael who try to downplay and to cloud and to darken the power of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And until the end of days, these two forces will counterbalance. But what's the greatest danger in the world? Says the Gra, the greatest danger in the world is if Esav and Yishmael ever came together, if they ever united. Says the Gra, if Edom and Yishmael ever united, they would destroy the world. That's the comment of the Gra. Why, says the Gra? Gra says an amazing thing. He says that Esav is the Bechar, so Esav is Cain. Yishmael is the younger son, is Hevel. Anybody know before Yom Tif, you got a suit, you took your suit to the Shatnez laboratory. What's wrong with Shatnez? Why can't you have wool and linen together? Say it's a chayk. Says Perkei Rabbi Lezer, no, it's not a chayk. There's a very simple reason for it. You had a guy by the name of Cain. Cain brought Miprihu Adama, he brought linen. Hevel brought Reishis Sinai, he brought wool. You can never mix Cain and Hevel together. When Cain and Hevel come together, they destroy the world. Esav is Cain and Yishmael is Hevel. And that's why you can't plow with an ox and a donkey together. Because the shar is Esav and the chamar is Yishmael. But if they ever came together, says the Gra, they would destroy the world. I found in the writings of my Zayda that there was a time in history that he personally witnessed that Esav and Yishmael came together and they almost destroyed the world. When he was in Auschwitz and he saw Eichmann, and Eichmann invited a special guest to Auschwitz, the Mufti from Jerusalem, and Eichmann and the Mufti sat arm in arm and they marched Yidden in front of them and they beat them in a way that it would be not possible for them to have children again. And that was the entertainment of Eichmann and the Mufti. And my grandfather wrote in his memoirs, this is a kiyum of the pasuk, Vayelech Esav El Yishmael. And as the Gra says, you want to know what the world will look like when Esav and Yishmael get together? Auschwitz, that's what it is. The unification, the unity of Esav and Yishmael. In fact, in 1945, the Germans were marching north up the Middle East. And they were going to come and they were going to wipe out the state of Israel, Palestine, in no time. In fact, when the Arabs got word that the Germans were coming into Palestine, they broadcast on the radio, Jews, we're going to bathe in your blood, we're going to abuse your women, we're going to abduct your children, we're going to slaughter you. They were waving Nazi signs, welcoming the Nazis, and the Nazis were going to wipe out Palestine in 10 days. People don't know, a tremendous miracle happened. The Nazis had just marched through the desert. They had no water to drink. And the British had the mandate in Palestine. And they tested out the water pipes. And they ran seawater through the water pipes. And the Nazi soldiers drank the seawater. They almost famished. And Rommel had to go back to Europe. It was a nisim v'neflois, miracle al alamein, that the Nazis were not able to come. Famously, the Panovitcher Rav was founding the Panovitcher Yeshiva at the time. By the way, at the time, all of the Rabbanim, all the Rosh Yeshivas gathered together. What are we going to do? The Jews of America are disappearing. The Jews of Europe are destroyed. There are very few Yeshiva Bachrim in Eretz Yisrael at the time. We're next. It's going to be a churban all over the world. And the Panovitcher Rav got up and he said, Hashem has a bris with Klal Yisrael. The Torah will always remain. Brisi Zois, Brisi Itam. And the Panovitcher Rav said we're going to be eligible to Siyata D'Shmaya L'Mala Min HaTeva. And a great miracle happened. and the Germans had to go south. There was one other time in history where Esav and Yishmael came together. When else in history did Esav and Yishmael come together? Purim.